Hello student, welcome to my class. Today I shall be talking about restoration heroic tragedy. This particular topic is from BA Part 1, Paper 1, which is the History of English Literature. I am Dr. Anindya Sundar Polley. I am an assistant professor at KKM College Jamui, a constituent unit of Munger University. Okay, so before I start my talk, let me give you a brief introduction about the Restoration Age. If you want to locate Restoration Age in history of English, in English history, you might see it is just immediately after Charles the One, who was been beheaded by the Puritans. Charles I was beheaded in the 1640s, and after that time, England had a Puritan interregnum, a Puritan period. It was ruled by Oliver Cromwell and Richard Cromwell between 1640 to 1660. In 1642, Puritans has closed all the theaters, they had stopped all the public entertainments, they had imposed certain rules and regulations. So it is the period after staying with the Puritan rule, England wanted to break free from them. So the people of England thought there should be the monarchy rule once again. So they asked Charles II to come back to the throne, and in the year 1660 there was the restoration of monarchy. That is why this particular age is called Restoration Age. So today I shall be talking about the Restoration heroic tragedy. So in this particular age there are several other kinds of drama also prospered. So during Cromwell's reign, the theatre of London were officially closed by the Puritan authorities, having been branded as immoral. But in the 1660, the restoration of the theatre coincided with the restoration of Charles II. At this time, the restoration comedy of manner flooded the whole England. It was directly related to the spirit of the age. But after some time, restoration comedy of manner also lost its popularity. And it is at this time a new kind of drama arose. This new kind of drama was popularly known as restoration tragedy or heroic tragedy. This new type of melodrama is often called as heroic play, which is always dealt in a stylized manner with the conflict between love and honor. So the predominating conflict shown all these restoration heroic tragedies are the conflict between love and honor. During the first 20 years after restoration, the heroic play reigned supreme. This form of drama was introduced by Sir William Davenant and popularized by none other than John Dryden. Dryden, in one of his writings, stated that an heroic play ought to be an imitation of a heroic poem, and consequently, that love and valor ought to be the subject of it. So he has given some kind of guideline. Okay, so the heroic play, let us look into the heroic play and its features. The heroic play demands some kind of heroic characters. Not tragic heroes like the Aristotelian tragic heroes, not like that. Not tragic heroes with fatal flaws, not confused idealists like Brutus, or say trapped sensibilities like Hamlet, but some kind of daring and passionate lovers. So, this is very important. The hero should be daring and passionate lover. They are trapped in the irresponsible conflict between their passion as lovers and their honors as friends or subjects or rulers. So, this is very important. Okay. They vent their agony in strong declamatory set speeches or highly stylized meditations of life and death before meeting their spectacular end. So, if you follow the general trend of heroic tragedy, you could say कि in all the tragedies there is some kind of spectacular end of the protagonist. So this is the thing which has to be maintained, which was the general feature of restoration heroic tragedy. Another thing is that, like restoration comedy of manner, the heroic tragedy was also for the upper class of the society. As the restoration was an unheroic age, the conception of heroism in heroic tragedy was some kind of artificial and inflated. The main difference between restoration comedy and restoration tragedy was, in comedy, the aristocratic audience wanted to recognize the actors, but this is interesting. In tragedy, they wanted to be thrilled by a world utterly removed from their own. So, whatever things they could not do in their real life, they wanted to do it through their tragedies. I mean, heroic tragedies. So, this particular form of heroic tragedy owed much to the contemporary interest in the French stage, in the works of, say, Corneille or Racine, and in the French prose romances, from which many of its plots were taken. So, the writings of Corneille and Racine, the French writers, and also the French prose romance. The influences of several British writers like Beaumont or Fletcher also took a vital role in the development. While the tradition of violent deeds, last seen in the works of Webster, Marton, and Ford, was here perpetuated in the scenes of blood and crime. So it has some kind of influence by the revenge writings, the revenge tragedies. Some great tragedians of these ages are John Dryden, Roger Boyle, the Earl of Moray, Thomas Otway, Nathaniel Lee, and Elkanah Shettle. So, in the course of the talk, let us discuss about the individual writers and their works. So, the first name which comes to our mind is Sir William Davenant. So, Sir William Davenant brought the heroic tragedy first on the stage. So, he is considered as the first restoration tragedy writer. His The Seas of the Roads helps one to trace the root of heroic poetry. The romantic plays of Beaumont and Fletcher suggested some of the themes and attitudes of Davenant's writing. The heroic world of Davenant's Gondibert also contributed to the influence. Then there is Roger Boyle, the Earl of Moray. Dryden had a great influence. I mean, Dryden was being influenced by Roger Boyle. He gave credit to Roger Boyle for the standard form of restoration tragedy. Roger Boyle used English materials in his two historical plays. He has written two historical plays. one is Henry the Fifth and the Black Prince. He used English material. I earlier developed he was very much influenced by the French writers, so there are some kind of French influences in the content. But in case of Roger Boyle, we can see that there is certain English material. I mean the content is very much English. So he used the popular device of antithetical emotions in the dramas. Ore uses a strong but some kind of artificial style in those plays. Okay, so the next dramatist is Sir Robert Howard, who was also the brother in law of Dryden. So, Dryden and his brother in law, Sir Howard, first popularized the heroic tragedy in The Indian Queen, which was written in the year 1664. Here, love and valor, the, the so called prescribed motives, are the conflicting forces. I have talked about it earlier also. Ki the conflict should be there between love and valor, love and courage. Okay, so this kind of conflicting forces are there. There is no as such character development in this play. So, a notable feature of this type of tragedy is the survival of the main pair of the lovers. So, the popularity of the Indian Queen, it was very much popular, and it induced Dryden to prepare a sequel, The Indian Emperor, which was written in the year 1665. This is a spectacular and ingeniously wrought drama which is sometimes preposterous in both its passions and in its situation. So, this particular drama is considered as one of the best heroic tragedies of that time period. Dryden has written several heroic tragedies during his time, and perhaps the most effective, the most representative of his works, and it is also considered Dryden's greatest work, The Conquest of Granada, which was written and published in 1670. Here he come across the male dominated heroic society. Here he defends the extravagances of action in heroic tragedies. So, not only it is one of the most representative works, he has actually defended the idea of heroic tragedy. So, all the features of heroic tragedy, from exotic scenery to some kind of grand oratory about love and about honor, are present there. And though Dryden sometimes rises above the convention of romantic poetic drama, he has followed it closely in this heroic tragedy. His another famous heroic tragedy written by Dryden was Aurangzeba, which was published in 1675, which was Dryden's last heroic tragedy. It is celebrated by powerful, aggressive, masculine heroes and their pursuit of glory, both as conquerors, rulers, and most importantly, as lovers. Because, as I have already said, there is a continual conflict between love and courage, love and some kind of passion. Okay, so in no other play, Dryden has more ingeniously tortured his love affairs. Dryden wrote another play, Tyrannic Love or The Royal Murder, which is full with highly declamatory speeches, which from now are the hallmark of this particular play. Okay, so let us move to the next writer, who was Nathaniel Lee. Nathaniel Lee was also very successful, and he can be considered as one of the most successful writers after Dryden. I mean, he was second in rank, maybe. But Nathaniel Lee's plays so less artistic control, and it had greater some kind of verbal violence. So he has traced on the concept of verbal violence. Violence should come out through the dialogues, through the speeches. His famous tragedy, the name of his famous tragedy is The Rival Queen. And another one he also wrote, it is called The Death of Alexander the Great. These two plays makes the transition between the heroic and neoclassical drama. This is very important. These particular plays makes the transition between heroic and neoclassical drama. So we are already moving towards the neoclassical age, where I mean the effect of restoration was slowly fading up, like after 15-20 years of the restoration, actual restoration. So there are some kind of transition which has already been started, and those transition elements are found in the writings of Nathaniel Lee to a large extent. Here, the fluency and the speed of action are also to be noted. So, and apart from that, Nathaniel Lee has also stressed on the torrent of violent imagery. He has used several violent imageries in all of his works. And another interesting fact is that the stories of his play have a strong, crude fascination account for much. His poetic gift, above all, might often induce some kind of minor Elizabethan envy. So, often he has reached to that kind of pinnacle where the famous Elizabethan writers could have envied him. So he was in other words, he was a great tragedy writer, and he was very famous during his time. Our next writer is Thomas Otway, whose plays mark a transition from heroics towards sentimental pathos. Now, this is important. So, the earlier heroism was slowly fading up because Otway was towards the end of Restoration Age. Okay, so in his writings, that there is a transition from heroics towards some kind of sentimental pathos. His first play is named as Alcibiades. It was not a very successful play, but it has renounced some kind of success in the on the stage. So, but it was something, this particular play Alcibiades, it earned him the attention of the literary circle. That was very important for his career. And his famous work is Don Carlos, the Prince of Spain, which was published in the year 1676, which is a very lively and craftsman-like example of the particular genre, heroic tragedy. His another play, another tragedy, The Orphan, is also very popular, was also very popular, and it is often called as she tragedy. Now, this is interesting. The Orphan is often called she tragedy. So, in this particular, this is different from the other tragedies written in that period. In this kind of tragedies, this tragedy is focused in the sufferings of innocent and virtuous women. Earlier, we had some kind of heroes, some valorful heroes are there, but for the first time, Otoe has introduced a virtuous heroine. So that is why this play is also known as she tragedy. So this play has a calmness of tone and absent of rant unusual in its day, because all the male, this is some kind of to some extent we can call it some kind of feminine tragedy, where that kind of verbal violence, verbal rant, all these things were absent. Instead, there is some kind of softness and calmness is there. His another play, Venice Preserved, is Otoe's very important creation. Here, the tragedy is on a very grandeur scale than that Orphan, and the characters are skillfully handled. Compared to Orphan, which had some kind of softness in it, it was written in a very grand manner. The play had a rugged and somber force, and it always reveals a kind of considerable skill in working out a dramatic situation. So these are the important writers of the age, and there are some less important tragedy writers. They are also there. Some of them are Elkanah Settle, John Crown, Nicholas Rowe. They are considered as the inferior tragedians of the contemporary time. And Elkanah Settle wrote one important famous play called The Empress of Morocco. Again, John Crown's famous play is Caligula, and Nicholas Rowe's famous play is Tamerlane. You should, all the students should remember these names, and this could be very much important in terms of your examinations, and maybe it may come as short answer questions and all. So these writers like Settle or Crown or Rowe, they also enrich the contemporary world of drama by their respective enterprises. So to conclude my lecture, it can be said that the years that Charles II and his court had spent in France during the interregnum period, that is 1640 and 60, made the tragedy writers acquainted with the French playwrights. So the French influence came directly from France, because Charles II was a relative of Charles I, perhaps his nephew, and when Charles I was beheaded, he escaped to France, and he, along with his men, they stayed in France for like 18 years, and he came back to get into the throne in 1660 only, when he was called for the restoration. So there is a heavy French influence on everything, mainly on the culture and literature, and on heroic tragedy it had a great influence. So it had a very important influence of the French writing. So it replaced the eminence of tragedy in the Elizabethan world. So because of this French influence, the considerable influence of the Elizabethan writers, who had ruled the world just like 60-70 years back, that kind of influence was not there on heroic tragedy. So although it had a little fineness of great Elizabethan tragic plays, it was highly influenced by French writers. It did not reflect the spirit of the age in the true sense. I have also talked about it. The spirit of the age was not there in the heroic tragedies, because there is some kind of artificiality in it. The people had tried to portray certain things which they could not make it happen in their real world. Okay, so that is why it has not reflected the spirit of the age. So, such would not survive long. This particular tradition did not survive long after Dryden. Still, these plays are found to be had some kind of important role in the 18th century tragedy to a great extent. Thank you.